Okay, Kat, set this topic up for us. It's something you feel very passionate about, I know, and you've got some great ideas about it. So talk us through the idea that IQ is dead. What do you mean by that?
The provocative title came from Harvey. He's like, we need a crowd drawer. So he came up with the IQ is dead bit. But I think probably it is dead when you think about the traditional view of intelligence. Actually, IQ is something that really is quite rigid and that you're born with. When you speak to a psychologist, which I have done as prep for this, and he said one of the things about traditional views of intelligence is that it isn't dynamic. And of course, we've heard in the past few years a lot about EQ, which is emotional quotient, all about empathy, the ability to walk in somebody else's shoes. I heard something a few months ago though, which and again I'd probably argue that is something broadly that you're born with. Some people are just more intuitive than others. Some people are able to feel others' feelings just intuitively, and maybe it's something that you can hone, but there's like an art and a skill of it. But then I heard something a few months ago, which was AQ, which piqued my interest, which is adaptability quotient. And so that's all about interest to possibilities, openness to change. And it's something about running at new experiences. It's about being interested and interesting. And as a planner and a strategist by trade, it's something that I really value is curiosity and embracing new and difference in the world and seeing how you can navigate it. And it struck me that in a world of increasing chaos, contradiction and complexity, that you can't actually manage complexity, you can only navigate it.
Okay, Harvey, do you want to build on that a bit?
When we think about EQ, there's been loads of stuff talked about it in terms of how EQ works in the workplace, right? But I suppose the thing is that there's been lots of stuff talked about in terms of EQ in the workplace and how it actually helps you to get on and actually navigate the workplace. I think the thing as strategists, when we are looking at consumer insight and understanding, is yes, we need to kind of have a healthy respect for our consumers, and what we need to do is we need to be connecting with them. The challenge that a lot of brands have is that they show up in consumer culture, but they don't necessarily connect. And we have a lot of clients come to us with brands that have traditionally done really brilliantly in broadcast communication. But the challenge is, though, that it's about not just being culturally present, but actually being culturally connected as a brand.
And Dan, from the client's point of view, we're talking about this world of chaos, complexity, contradiction. How has it changed the way you market and the way you come up with your brand strategy?
For me, I think adaptability is the key theme that we've been talking between the three of us around. So working in a video games company, we have the fortuitousness of it being generally kind of a high interest category. I think for us, one of the challenges that we've had to sort of face, I think, is around understanding kind of what is an established playbook and how we kind of go to market. And I think as our business has kind of evolved, we've got different business models, I think. So thinking around sort of how we adapt our route to market, how we adapt to what we're seeing in terms of the landscape, it is kind of one of our biggest, I think, challenges and opportunities that we're often kind of trying to face and realise. So we've been doing some work with Harvey, particularly on kind of how do you connect with culture. And I think one of us, you sort of think video games naturally, organically sits within culture. But when you think you're the brand owner, sometimes you lose that sense of perspective. So for us, it's trying to understand how do we connect? What are the opportunities then to continue that connection? Because I know it sounds horrendously cliche, but nothing stays static anymore. And I think it's like, how do you continue to sort of try to stay relevant? Adaptability is kind of key, and something that, we certainly don't always get right, but continuing aspiring to try and get better at.
Kat, putting some sort of flesh on the theoretical bones, give us some examples of work that really illustrates this well, and things that you may have done or that you've seen out in the market. We're in the Cannes Festival of Creativity. Is there anything that's really caught your eye that ticks those boxes that you've been talking about there?
So, I mean, I went to a panel yesterday, which was with Bayer, and they were talking about how they were partnering with Heineken to actually get to different audiences, and it doesn't feel like a natural fit, does it? Healthcare with a booze brand, but the biggest booze brands that are in growth are 0% beers. So actually, that does make a lot of sense, and that is a different moment to connect. And then the other thing that I've been really impressed with in culture is the kind of luxury fashion brands. Look at Balenciaga with The Simpsons. Look at the collaboration between Adidas and Gucci. And just that kind of blend between streetwear and high fashion wear, and just kind of the origination of when you get a mashup and the playfulness of that. I mean, we live in a society at the moment where everything feels really serious, and so I'm really drawn towards the brands that bring a little bit of levity, enjoyment, and lightness back, and give us permission to smile.
A lot of the work that will win this week is very purpose-based, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we can talk about purpose as well. But do you think we have lost a bit of the fun in the advertising creative industries?
We probably have lost a lot of fun, and I think there's been a challenge over the recent years with and when you're talking about IQ and intelligence, it's about consumer data, consumer understanding, but actually insight doesn't come out of numbers, understanding does. And it's the texture and how you actually will use those data to actually create that connection and create and find that empathetic kind of bridge that you need to actually find. And yeah, there's a lot of numbers. Lots of the people on this boat will buy the same data sets, but then try and find competitive advantage by all looking at the same data. Like, all of us look at similar stuff that's been bought from Kantar, Millward Brown, Ipsos, whatever. But where is the difference? The difference is going to be coming in and looking at where the qualitative understanding around those numbers really kind of exists, so that we can actually start to put a little bit of magic back into the work. And we're just obsessed with empirical understanding, that I think sometimes that can get in the way. I do think what's quite interesting, though, is that when you look at the work that tends to get creatively awarded, as you alluded to, it kind of has more kind of social purpose, or does some kind of good in the world. But is that really affecting enough change for a client's business? Are those ideas big enough, and are they scaled enough? I think there's a challenge between looking at finding interesting creative execution versus taking a position on something and then looking at how you mine that position over a period of time. It's kind of the theory of a marketing or a brand positioning versus taking a position on something. And I think if you take a position on something, it allows you to find those tensions in culture, have a point of view, to actually say what you want to say, but similarly rail against the opposing argument, and you've got to be prepared to deal with some of the backlash that ensues. But as a consequence, you have more authenticity with your audience that you're trying to communicate with. So I think, again, that's kind of just another way of kind of looking at this, the need to be empathetic, to understand that brands need to be multifaceted in the same way that we are as human beings, right? You need to build a 3D picture of a brand. It's not about reach and frequency anymore, where you just say one message and you just drill it in people through broadcast media. It's much more nuanced.
We're going into more of a survival mode in terms of economics. How do you navigate that as a brand? How do you exhibit your authentic brand purpose, but you want to sell product, you want to sell to everyone, so it's a tricky thing to navigate, isn't it?
For us, I think we tried to do more on a franchise level. I think it's kind of how do we, I think it's Harvey saying, it's like trying to have sort of the sense of purpose, but with a relevancy to what we're doing. So I think some of us, our biggest endeavours have probably been on Call of Duty. We have an endowment fund it is limited to the US and UK, but it's committed to kind of getting veterans back into sort of meaningful work. And I think the challenge you have with these things is you can't expect kind of short-term results. It has to be a long investment, and it has to have a relevancy to what we do. So, military is a key part of that franchise, so it feels authentic for us to acknowledge that. But it isn't something where you can invest in year one and expect these metrics to change. It's to have a sense of purpose, I think you have to take a much kind of longer term view. So I think that's quite difficult in a business that can sometimes be very secular. It's looking for results in year one, and everything's kind of driven from a fiscal point of view around those commercial objectives. So I think you have to take a much more lateral view in terms of kind of how you think you can apply that. But we're trying to explore different franchises, different ways they can kind of connect, and it's harder and harder, I think, for us, is just in terms of that relevancy between local causes and local sort of sense of purpose versus a more global sense of scale. And again, if you look at the military as one example, that may not work in every geography that we're relevant. So it's trying to, again, kind of be adaptive to where that plays a role for us.
Talking about emotional intelligence, we're much more aware of factors like mental health after the last 2.5 years. Our people, the great resignation, talent is a talent business. How's that impacting the way campaigns are put together? Because people want to work on things they believe in. They want to engage with products that they believe in, and if they don't, they will stop buying it or they won't work with you anymore. So it's this intelligence idea is really key to the whole process, isn't it?
Well, actually, I mean, this is, I don't know if we talked about this, Steve, but this is like a real passion point of mine about mental health. It's something that I have gone through myself, had challenges at different moments in my life. And so I do quite a lot of work with NABS in Canada about it. So, and we're really hot on it in the Plus company, and something that we've developed and are developing at the Plus company at Cassette is we're doing something called Candid Conversations to start trying to have more candid conversations about mental health. So creating the space for people to be able to share their stories. And I think it's got to start kind of in internally and kind of living it. And that comes to life in different ways for different people. So I think that, the leadership is, for something in this area, it's about making it a high status behaviour to really care about something like this, so you can create the space for discourse to happen, and allowing people to work in different ways as well. I remember someone from my team had said that she was really struggling because she suffers from seasonal adjusted disorder, and so I was like, no problem, let's just like time shift your hours. So she started at 7 in the morning and finished at 3, so she gets some daylight and a bit of vitamin D. And I think that flexibility, I think that was actually before the pandemic. But I mean, certainly the way we work, you trust your team and they can work in different ways. And then certainly with clients as well. I'm a big fan of anyone who's worked with me knows that I bore on about radical candor, which is all about caring personally and challenging directly. And really that's the kind of sweet spot of radical candor. So I think it's with clients, treating clients as partners, and being able to have those discussions and having the real conversations that maybe traditionally we wouldn't have done because we wanted to all come across a bit professional and polished. And actually, no, there's a different way to do it. And I think that's where the magic happens.
I think what it's done is it's just put a lot of stuff that was already happening into sharper focus, really, more than anything else. I think there's been a move towards being much more empathetic with your co-workers and much more collaborative. I think gone are the days where strategists go into the darkened room to have the eureka moment and then come out with this beautiful crafted brief that everybody goes and like the scales sort of fall from people's eyes and creatives go and do the magic, right? The way that we need to be working is in a much more collaborative manner. There's not really the baton passing that there used to be. You get in a room and you kick it around together, recognizing that everybody has a different expertise and a different role to play within that room. And through that collaboration and empathizing and understanding and being respectful of different ideas, with inevitable friction that needs to be part of that creative development process, you get to a better place in the end anyway. And I think it's just that the openness to be challenged, and also the kind of a more collaborative way of working actually helps everybody to kind of get in the boat together and have a bit of skin in the game together. And I think that kind of helps a lot. And we've seen that it doesn't have to happen in real life in one place anymore. Like, we were all really resistant of collaborative working through screens and in different locations around the world. Like, this is actually quite a weird scenario where we're all in one place. Like, there's not a video, I'm not talking into a video screen for a change, which is actually quite nice.
How do we change the way we think about the marketing conundrums we face and the ones we've been talking about? What are you looking to do in that over the next 12, 18 months?
I think for me, what Cannes kind of represents is an opportunity to sort of take a little bit out of the kind of freneticness of everyone's sort of day-to-day, week-to-week life, and try and find a moment to kind of build connections with people, particularly post-pandemic. I think that's incredibly important. And also, I think it is trying to look for ways to sort of be inspired and ways to think of doing things differently. I personally think, you know, whether the work that we've seen this week is always more around this purposeful agenda or not, it is, I think, one of our biggest conundrums is about sort of getting comfortable with the level of risk that you take, you know. As Harvey was saying earlier, I mean, we as a company rely on lots of data, and we have a abundance of data in terms of what our players are doing and how much time they're spending and all those kind of things. But I don't think you can ever lose the real value of kind of, for me, of kind of a core consumer insight that can drive a great piece of thinking. So for us, I think, you know, our biggest challenge is like, how do we get comfortable with taking sometimes the risks required to nurture ideas, to give things a chance. And I think one of the ethoses that we've been working on for the last 18 months is about taking a bit more of a sort of test and learn, being more adaptive, in rather than trying to find one thing that solves all your problems and you do a 2-week campaign. It's more a longer term play and a more optimistic view. And I think for us, what this kind of week represents is trying to find partners and you know, connections that can help us understand how we sort of take those calculated risks to do great work and to continue to make, I think, our franchises do them proud and connect with new audiences in ways that I don't think we've done before.
I think everyone that you connect with, and especially whether it's people that you know that you connect with more deeply on an away session like this, you have kind of different conversations when you're outside of the day-to-day, and with new people as well. There's opportunities to learn from everybody and take something from each and every conversation. And I think that what I'll take away is and again, coming back to like the adaptability thing, is that it's about being energized by difference and running towards difference. And you know, sometimes there will be hiccups and it'll be a bit painful, but that's what I always say to my kids, you know, kind of, that's why it's called growing pains, because actually growth is painful. And you know, like when you had a really good workout and you get that kind of pain in your muscles afterwards, it's like learning to enjoy that as well when we make mistakes. And one thing that you were saying, Dan, about you know, comfort, I think it's about getting more comfortable with discomfort and courage as well, and being able to just try and do different things and relishing the endeavour and the quest, and how enjoying the hard times as well as just the easy times, because the hard times are when you grow, and I think that's all about the adaptability and growth mindset.
Over this next 12 months, I suppose it's just trying to get clients to be comfortable with dealing with some of the bigger challenges that they face at a more fundamental sort of strategic basis with their businesses, because I think the challenge, particularly in creative awards ceremonies, is that there's a big focus on execution and activation, and that's all well and good, but you've then got the tricky second album, third album, fourth album after that, and sometimes you can have really great success with an activation, but you haven't necessarily got the strategic underpinnings to follow it up. And so I think actually there are increasingly there are conversations that we're having with our clients to get those strategic underpinnings and the bedrock in place, so that they have a better sense of who they are as brands. So that, and if you do your brand building enough and you build enough of a three-dimensional view of what your brand is, then it opens you up to greater opportunities to culturally connect through multiple activations that all ladder up to a singular point of view. So I think over the next year, it's about having those difficult conversations with clients to remind them of the importance to get the foundation stones in for good brand building and sort of stewardship, to then allow you to have more fun once your point of view on the world is able to manifest itself. Because there's no substitute for a great idea because you've got a really great idea when it starts to write itself into different places. And I think that's the area that we want to kind of be focusing on with our clients.
Can you just put your hands together for our great panelists, Kat Wiles, Harvey Cosell and Dan Green. Thank you very much for listening.